So Megan is actually a wonderful person, and those of you who follow my completely DevOps-related Twitter account with a Attack Kitten, while I spent a lot of time traipsing around overseas, Megan made sure the kitten stayed alive. So she's an amazing person for that reason alone. But the reason I wanted her to talk to us today is because the work she's doing at Yelp and she's done over the years in security is the exact sort of thing that all of us who would like our security team to maybe do some DevOpsy stuff with us are going to need to know. So without further ado, Megan Carney.
Hey everyone. So I wanted to start out with a little bit about what I do and my experience, so you know where I'm coming from. I have been doing InfoSec for about 10 years now, mostly on the blue team side of the world, and mostly as an analyst, which means I look at a lot of IDS screens, I look at antivirus alerts, I read network flows, sometimes packet captures, and then I make up conspiracy stories. Yes, exactly. And sometimes they turn out to be true, and sometimes they don't. So, and I've worked in several different environments, which I haven't worked specifically in DevOps a lot, but I have worked in different places that felt more functional than others. I've worked for an EDU, I've worked in the private sector, and right now I work for a .com. And as Bridget already mentioned, that .com is Yelp. Our mission at Yelp is to connect people with great local businesses. I'd like to think we're pretty good at it. And what we do is we allow people to post reviews, to check in. Basically, we allow people to tell their friends about what they love. And this is a pretty good model. It's worked for us. And you might be asking yourself, what does that have to do with security? We have approximately 86 million mobile users. This slide is actually a little out of date. We hit our 100th millionth review not too long ago. And we operate in 32 countries. So think about all of the data that these statistics entail, and then you'll know why Yelp worries about security. Because we take our users, we respect our users, and we take that data very seriously, and we need to make sure that we are good stewards. Before I go too much further, I need to talk about a little disclaimer. I want you to think of the next 20 minutes or so as InfoSec story time. So I'm going to talk about some things that I've learned. Some of them are from my experience. Some of them are not. Because of the work that I do, I might have to fuzz a few of the details. There's going to be a few stories about Alice and Bob. You're just going to have to bear with me. All right, so disclaimer out of the way. InfoSec story time. My first real job, I was really pumped. I just graduated with my master's degree. I was going to go do some security 101, right? So I'm going to go into this company. We're going to do some least privilege. We're going to do some defense in depth. The business is going to take my advice. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, you can probably guess what happened. I learned my first lesson. Analysts don't choose what gets fixed. They estimate risk. This is actually entirely logical once you get out in the real world and understand it. But what it means is you find yourself saying some very surreal things, like, we don't have to upgrade from Windows XP when support ends, but here's what's going to happen if we don't, right? Or, we don't have to purge the database every few years, but here is what it will cost us per record if this data is breached. So, first lesson, as an analyst, you do not have as much control as you would like. My second lesson is that when you are changing culture, it's a hard sell. People have no reason to listen to you, right? That person in accounting who put their password on a Post-it note and then stuck it to their monitor, they've been doing their job just fine before you came along and told them that they were doing it wrong. So you have to tread very carefully. And this is why so many InfoSec people get really angry. Because most of the InfoSec people I know sincerely want to come to work, they want to do a good job, they want to make the world a safer place. And then they run into these two problems, right? They feel responsible, but they don't have that much control. And sometimes that makes people really bitter, angry, a little cynical. But this is the real solution. And this is what I've learned over the course of my career, that if you really want to make constructive changes in an organization, if you really want to make the organization safer, you need to be patient with people, you need to be compassionate, you need to listen to them. Basically, you need to be nice. So that's what the focus of my presentation is going to be, how security can be nice. Because it's really easy to fall into these wrong answers, right? That the person who's standing in your way is doing that because they're being mean, because they're wrong, because they don't want to do their job well, right? Yeah, and this isn't, I know, I love this quote, right? This isn't particularly useful. I think in most cases, people are trying to do their job well, they have certain constraints, and if you as security come in and you're just another constraint, another thing that makes their job more difficult, you're not going to get very far. So that's the wrong answer. What's the right answer? So how to win friends. And I know I'm at a DevOps days, so perhaps I'm preaching to the choir here, but you really do need to listen to people, and you need to have honest conversations with them where you don't start out from the assumption that they're trying to make your life harder, right? They're just trying to do their job. And most people love to talk about what they do. So ask them. Ask them why they do what they do. Ask them about the flow of their work. And understand the context that they're operating in. Because if you want to design good solutions, these are the things you need to know. And you need to really consider all the possible solutions. Remember what I said about assessing risk, right? The reason that analysts assess risks and don't directly make business decisions is because the business doesn't exist to be secure. The business exists to serve a purpose, to make a product, to offer a service. And you need to pick a solution that fits within that context, and that might mean you compromise a little bit on security. It might mean you take a risk, but businesses take calculated risks all the time. That's what they're supposed to do. And in the end, you need to pick a solution that also works based on culture. And this is another thing that was sort of a rude awakening when I went out into the real world. Sometimes you get to take administrative control away from your users, and this is really cool if you're in security because it makes your life so much easier. And sometimes you don't, right? And when that call is made, you don't get to sit around and be grumpy at your desk all day. You still have to make decisions. You still have to figure out how to make the organization move forward. So, how to win friends. Here's a few ways. Self-serve alerts. Credentials being stolen is a big problem. I know there's been a few big password dumps recently, and I know all of your users never reuse passwords, so this isn't a problem for you, right? Yeah. So self-serve alerts are good for finding stolen credentials because you alert only if the user doesn't acknowledge that that action was taken. So it means your security team doesn't have to respond to every single alert. They're not nagging everyone at the company, but they respond to the ones that go unacknowledged. So here are some cases that are good. If a user account is disabled by an admin, if a login comes in from an unexpected place or during an unexpected time. Oops, there's a typo there. And you can do this analysis on your own logs in your SIM if you want, like calculate average logins per hour based on a particular user. If it runs outside of a standard deviation, you can alert on that. Also, if you have a package management system that you use to deploy software, maybe you want to do a self-serve alert when new packages are created. So there's a bunch of applications for this that have to do with discovering misuse of credentials. Another thing, and this is probably the biggest one, is you want to build things for other people. So I think Nicole talked about, making sure that you offer menus. Well, you can offer pre-built solutions. So you want to be able to upgrade your encryption algorithms, your key links, whenever the whenever they go out of style, right? So make it a drop-in upgrade. Don't sit there in the security department and complain about how the code is this big mess of spaghetti and it can't be fixed. Like, go fix it. Go help them. Another cool thing that I've seen work is embedding your security experts with other departments. So maybe you have a product or a department that needs a little extra love. That's cool. Put someone full-time on them for full-time within that department for a while. Maybe you just made an acquisition and it's a new product and it also has some flaws that need to be fixed, right? Embed your security experts within that department. I talked earlier about listening and having these conversations, right? There's no better way to completely understand what people are going through than to work with those people closely for an extended period of time. And this approach has the added benefit of building connections across the organization. So when they want to know, how should I do password management? How should I do hashes? Where should I put private data? They can come ask you when they feel like there's a relationship there, rather than being sort of that wizard over in the corner that nobody goes to talk to, right? Another thing that we do at Yelp is we automate tasks where details are important. So I'm sure I don't need to tell everyone here how important automation is, but specifically with security, what this means is when you're disabling user accounts, because I am sure that everyone here has single sign-on, right? There's only one user authentication, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So most companies aim for single sign-on, but end somewhere else, just because of the nature of the beast. So if you can make sure that every single time someone leaves your company, their access gets revoked, that's very important. There are some scary stories where people have gone back to make registrar changes and then looked at the approved user list and like, oh, so there's that person that left a year ago and they can change our domain name settings because they still have access, right? Because that was a separate authentication flow. So those are the things you kind of want to automate. Also, at Yelp, we have something we open source called OSX Collector. It collects a bunch of forensic data. I don't know how many people know about it, but basically what it is a bunch of scripts that collects all the information we want from a machine when we want to examine it. And the upside of this approach is when we're concerned about a machine, we don't go to help desk and we say, run this series of 10 commands and you have to run them in this order and then like tar up this input exactly like this and then send us this file, right? That doesn't work very well. So instead what we do is we have this thing called OSX Collector, and that's something we built to make our life easier and to make help desk's life easier too. So I talked about single sign-on. If you can get single sign-on, go for it. This is like the only place, and the only place where I've seen people be able to stand up, where like Alice can actually stand up in front of the board and say, I saved you money this year. We had one place to create users, we had one place to disable them, one password, so your password policy can be a little bit more sane, and one place to gather authentication logs. And if you can stand up and say, it used to take us 4 hours to get someone set up as a new hire, now it takes us 10 minutes. And 10 minutes after they leave, we can make sure we revoked all their access. That's a big money saver, and it's good security. So, another way to win friends. And how to influence people. I chose this idea because it sort of highlights the importance, like the theme of this speech, which is security is there to serve the purpose of the business and to serve the users within the business. So you don't get to be the cranky person in the corner who's always saying no. Well, you can be if you want, but you're not going to do very much good, right? So ask what you can do for your users. Always be asking how you can make their life easier and a little bit more secure. Because this is what retroactive security feels like. It kind of sucks. Like, I've been to this party and you don't want to do this. And the solution to this, of course, is to move left, to be proactive and to be approachable. And this means offering menus of solutions. So if somebody wants to know, hey, how do I do encryption? They're not Googling Stack Overflow and Wikipedia for half an hour and then coming up with their own approach, right? You have a menu. Maybe you built a library for them. But you're there to help them with advice, so they do it in a sane way. It also means you might want a streamlined process for third-party products. So if Bob comes to Alice and says, hey, I want to use this really new 3D imaging tool, or really cool 3D imaging tool to help visualize some of my metrics, and Alice just says, no, I don't know about that tool, I don't trust it. That's not going to get you very far. So you can create a short, sane list of questions that, and let me stress this, are human readable by someone who is not in InfoSec to sort of screen these products. And in the best case, you get to tell Bob, hey, cool, go have fun. And in the worst case, you have a good reason for saying no. So for instance, I've run across a few products where they automatically upload every finished image up to this central server so they can do some data on them, right? Depending upon your use case, that may or may not be acceptable, but at least you have an answer, an answer that has some foundation to give to your users about why they can't use something. And this last one is super important. You want to make sure you're open to conversations with your users and that they're telling you things. You will get false positives all the time. You will have to explain that message undeliverable email for the bajillionth time. I know this is true, but it's better than the alternative. So here's a story about Alice and Bob. So Bob gets this email. It has this really cool cat video attached, and he wants to open it, but it's not sure it's safe. So he goes to Alice and explains his predicament. And Alice says, hey, I'll open it for you. And if it looks all right, then I'll tell you, and then you can open it, right? So we can all imagine how this story ends, and you might be thinking, stupid user tricks, right? No, that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is they didn't think to go to security. Why is that? Why wasn't security approachable enough that they felt like they could go to security for advice? Because I think working in InfoSec, you sort of live and breathe this stuff every day, and these things seem obvious to you, and you forget that they're not obvious to the rest of the world. So it's very important to remember when you're talking to users and when you're explaining things, to be kind and be polite, without being condescending, of course. But you want to keep that dialogue open, because otherwise, bad things happen, and you end up with 2 infections instead of 1. All right, misconfigurations. So noisy environments are hard to write good alerts for. So as an InfoSec person or in a security department, you might be thinking, ops isn't my job. The fact that they didn't configure that server correctly, not my problem. Well, yes, it is. When you want to monitor an environment, you want to be looking at nice, clean graphs. You don't want square waves, you don't want spikes, right? And if you want to have data that's clean, you need to have a clean environment. And you do that by fixing misconfigurations. And you also do that by standardizing processes. So if you want to, say, alert on the creation of accounts that aren't created by your normal workflow, but there's 15 different workflows, that doesn't go over very well, right? So it is in security's interest to make sure that the environment is clean and to help simplify those workflows, and also to do log review and help with problems, right? So if you see a machine that is constantly trying to connect out to something and failing, that machine is either seriously infected or it's seriously broken. And either way, it's an InfoSec problem, because you don't want that to be triggering your IDS, you don't want that to be messing up your logs, you want to fix it so you have clean signals in your environment. All right, so that's the end of the meat of my speech. So as you've probably figured out, I do incident response, not so much digital forensics, but I'm starting a local group, and if you are interested or know people who are interested, follow the directions on this slide. Tell me a little bit about who you are, and then we're gonna start with informal meetings for now. I'm hoping to go to formal eventually, but basically I would just like to be able to get people in the Twin Cities together who do this sort of work so we can discuss tactics, things that work, things that don't work, basically help each other out. And I'm a little long on time here, but this is Yelp. So these are some links that PR wanted to share with you, or PR wanted me to share with you, and also that I want to share with you. Yelp has a really cool team. We do really interesting work. If you think you might be interested in working for Yelp, or you think, especially if you're a security person, come talk to me, and I'll see if your skills have a place. If you want to work somewhere outside of security, that's awesome. I can tell you about culture, but I'm definitely not a developer, so I can't give too many details on that. We also have a blog where we talk about the things that we open source, like Pasta and OSX Collector, and another cool thing coming very soon for automating collection. And we have a GitHub account. And I totally ran fast, so if anybody has questions, I will repeat them for the mic if you want to yell them out. All right, cool, 5 extra minutes.
Okay. So I think do we have a minute or two for questions, or are we gonna? Excellent. So we have just a little bit of time for questions. It works best, I think I maybe see a hand back there. It works best if I run a mic to you, just so that your question gets captured for the video. So do we have a question or two? I can't actually see very well, I'm sorry. Central aisle, wonderful. Thank you. Oh, we don't need the house lights up, it's fine.
Yeah, what does DFIR minion, does that stand for something? What does that stand for?
That stands for Digital Forensics and Incident Response. That's a good question, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have I think everyone is suddenly like, wow, our brains are full of information. One more question here, and then we're gonna call it, but thank you.
So if we're coming from like the developer or ops side, what can we do to collaborate more effectively with security?
Start the conversation early and talk about use cases. So what's a good example? So if you're doing a service that, say, does some sort of location tracking, and or a service that collects any sort of data on a user, then it's a good time to start a conversation with security, because there can be privacy concerns around that, of course. And depending upon the kind of data you're collecting, there might be legal privacy concerns as well as ethical privacy concerns. So start the conversation really, really early is my best advice, and then tell them what you want to do. Like, is it that you need to protect data? Is it that you need to access data? Is it that you need to share data? Because sometimes you'll have an external partner that's gonna do some data crunching for you, and you wanna send them like this big file of everything ever, which is a good time to come talk to security and find out if you need to send them everything ever, or maybe just like part of everything ever.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. All right.